Hello, welcome to Paige Grows Design. I have a Valentine's Day project today that will literally warm your heart. They are rice bags that you heat in the microwave just so they can mussels, or I carry one around just to stay warm. It's not a new project for me, but it is the first time I've shared it on my blog. Made these probably about 15 years ago, and I used a pair of old satin pajamas and one of my husband's shirts. Made a mistake by using fusible web to adhere my applique heart, and found out that heated in the microwave, the rice gets so hot that the fusible web actually comes through the fabric, and so it sort of ruined it. In that same vein of using things that I already had, I thought it would be a good idea this would be a way to use shirt material. If you've had somebody who's passed in the last couple years who their shirts were really memorable, or clothing that they wore was really memorable, this is a nice way to piece those pieces of fabric together, especially if you're giving these to family members who would recognize the fabrics. The outer pillowcase is one piece of fabric. I seamed it in the back. I used French seams so there are no rayages showing, but you'll cut a 14 by 18 inch piece of fabric. The patchwork, I happen to have, I didn't have any shirts of, say, like my father's to use, or my husband's. I did raid his closet to see if I could find anything, and he didn't have anything that was worn out. I used swatches from a tailor. So these are fabrics, shirt fabrics that are available at a tailor. And I pieced those together. I did an assembly line, so I stitched two pieces together and stitched a whole line of those and cut them apart, and then you end up with two pieces, and so those together you get 4 pieces, on and on and on and on, and eventually you have these long strips that then you can stitch vertically. Just word of advice, you'll press the back of the seams down, and it is much easier. Make sure that your seams are stitched or are pressed in the same direction. If you do it the other way, you stand a chance of binding up. So if you did it that way, as your presser foot's going along, you stand the chance of binding up on the back. Made that mistake. I've actually made it a couple times. I wasn't bright enough to make sure that I didn't do it a few times. And from there, you'll end up with pieces like this, which of course I used my heart templates. Anything that I tend to reuse, I laminate so that it makes them stiffer and they hold up, and used my invisible ink, and I think they're more interesting if you place them on an angle. Plus you get a better yield. You get more hearts out of it. And you just simply trace around, cut out. And when I pressed my fabric, I pressed these in half so that it left a slight mark down the center so that I had something to line my hearts up with. From here, you'll pin your hearts on and do a zigzag stitch around the outside edge. So now that you have the outer edge stitched down with a zigzag, I actually, on the larger hearts, went ahead and did a straight stitch, slightly in from the zigzag, and then I added some just embroidery, some sort of wabi-sabi stitching, and this is the time that you'll do that because you'll be able to put a embroidery hoop on. Do that stitching now, and then you need an 18-inch piece of rickrack, and we're going to place it on the top. You're going to want to stitch down the center, the very center of the rickrack, and that's with a straight stitch. Now you're going to take all your pins out and press back. So this is the back side. You're going to press that right at the seam to expose that finished edge. And then you're going to fold that in, wrong sides together, along the length, and pin that. We have one ready to go. And you will stitch from the bottom raw edge along that seam. And I like to do an 1/8 inch allowance. So I pull my needle over to the edge of the seam as far as I can get it. Now you're going to turn this inside out. And you will press this seam down. And fold it back on itself. You want to get that edge just like this one. Now you have the wrong side of the fabric out. You have that first seam that you made is now on the inside, and you're going to encase it with another seam. Now this time you're going to move your needle over and do just beyond. What you want to do is stitch just beyond where that raw edge is in the inside. Now you're going to turn it right side out again. Now if you have the ability to make the bed of your sewing machine smaller so that you can work on like sleeves and arms and things like that, you'll do that now, and you'll make a top stitch along as close to the edge of this as possible. Now that you've top stitched along the brick rack, now you're going to press that flat, put your heart in the center. You'll be able to see the seam on the back through the fabric in the front, and you can tell whether they are aligned. Pin it. Again, do an 1/8 inch seam allowance along that bottom on the right side of the fabric. And trim your corners. Just snip the corners. Turn this inside out. Take the point of your scissors, get your corners nice. Press this flat, and now you're going to stitch down along there just like you did for this French seam. You're going to do the same exact thing at the bottom. And when you're finished with that seam, then you'll be ready to stitch the pillow that holds the rice. This is the inside of your pillowcase. Two French seams, all of your raw edges are concealed. Two pieces of fabric. So I'll do a stitch all the way around and leave just on either side at the top open to put the rice. And I will do a back stitch at the beginning of that and at the end of it. So back stitched on either side, stitch the whole way around. From there, you will fill your rice bags. Once you have filled your pillows with rice and stitched the opening closed, and in my case, I'm going to ship these to my Valentines without the rice. It's just simpler. Everybody usually has rice in their house. And I'm going to enclose a needle and thread for them to just hand stitch the opening closed. Put this then in your pillowcase. And they are now ready to warm your heart and all of your Valentine's